The horizon's edge cut through the darkness of space like a silver needle threading through black cloth. Commander stood on the bridge, watching the massive space station grow larger in the viewport. Terminus Prime was enormous, bigger than any human structure he had ever seen. Lights sparkled across its surface like a city floating in the void. "We're being hailed, sir," Lieutenant Sophie Grant said from her station. Her fingers moved quickly across the controls. "They're sending docking coordinates." Nodded, "Take us in slowly. Let's not give them any reason to think we're aggressive." Ambassador Hayes stepped onto the bridge, adjusting his formal jacket. The older man looked nervous, which was unusual for him. "This is it, Commander. Our first real chance to prove humanity belongs in galactic society." "We'll do fine, Ambassador," said, though he kept his eyes on the station. "Just stay calm and follow the protocols." The horizon's edge was small compared to most galactic vessels. Earth had only been part of the greater galaxy for 3 years, and humanity was still learning how to build proper starships. But what the ship lacked in size, it made up for in speed and efficiency. Was proud of his crew and his vessel. As they approached the docking bay, could see other ships from dozens of different species. Some were sleek and elegant, others were massive and intimidating. The variety was stunning. Every 10 years, the Empire hosted the Sovereign's Challenge, a tournament where the galaxy's strongest warriors competed for honor and glory. More importantly, it was where political alliances were formed and trade agreements were signed. The docking procedure took 20 minutes. When it was complete, gathered his team in the airlock. Besides Sophie and Ambassador Hayes, he brought 2 security officers and a cultural liaison. They were all wearing their best uniforms, dark blue with silver trim. "Remember," Hayes said, "we're here to observe and make connections, the value strength and honor above all else. We need to show them we're worthy partners." The airlock opened, and they stepped into a corridor that was almost too large for them. Everything here was built for beings much bigger than humans. The ceiling was at least 15 feet high, and the doorways were wide enough to drive a vehicle through. An official was waiting for them. She stood nearly 10 feet tall, with smooth gray skin and 4 arms. Her eyes were large and golden, and she wore robes that shimmered with embedded technology. "Welcome to Terminus Prime," she said in perfect English. The translator device on her collar flickered as she spoke. "I am Coordinator. I will escort you to the diplomatic quarter." "Thank you," Hayes said, bowing slightly. "We're honored to be here." As they walked through the station, observed everything carefully. They moved with grace despite their size. He saw dozens of other species too, some familiar from previous encounters, others completely new. The station was like a living museum of galactic diversity. Coordinator led them to a large amphitheater where the opening ceremony was being held. Thousands of beings filled the seats, and the noise was incredible. At the center of the arena stood a massive stage where various dignitaries were giving speeches. "Your seats are in Section 12, said, pointing to an area marked with Earth's symbol. "The tournament brackets will be announced after the speeches conclude." The human delegation found their seats and sat down. Felt small in the oversized chairs, but he maintained his composure. On the stage, a warrior was being introduced to thunderous applause. "That's," Sophie whispered, leaning close to, "the current champion." Studied the warrior carefully, was even larger than most, standing at least 12 feet tall. His body was covered in natural armor plates that looked like polished stone. He had 4 massive arms, each one thicker than his entire torso. Scars crossed his chest and arms, marks of countless battles. Raised all 4 arms, and the crowd roared louder. He spoke in the language, his voice deep and resonating. The translator in his ear provided the words. "For 30 years I have defended my title," declared. "I have faced the strongest warriors from every corner of the galaxy. None have defeated me. I stand here unbroken, unbeaten, and I welcome any who dare to challenge me." The crowd erupted in cheers. Scanned the audience, his eyes moving from section to section. When his gaze fell on the human delegation, he paused. A smile crossed his face, but it was not friendly. "I see we have new faces among us," continued. "The humans have finally decided to join our gathering. Tell me, small ones, have you brought a champion to face me? Or are you here merely to watch as real warriors compete?" The amphitheater fell silent. Every eye in the massive space turned toward the human section, felt the weight of thousands of stares. Hayes started to stand, but put a hand on his arm. "Let me handle this," said quietly. He stood up slowly, making sure his movements were calm and non-threatening. He looked directly at, meeting the giant warrior's eyes across the distance. "We came here to establish diplomatic relations," called out. His voice was steady and clear. "We're interested in trade, cultural exchange, and mutual cooperation. We didn't come to prove our strength through combat." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Smile grew wider, but his eyes narrowed. "You refuse my challenge?" asked. "Every species that wishes to be taken seriously in this galaxy must prove their worth in the arena. It is tradition. It is honor. Are you saying humans have no honor?" "I'm saying we have different values," replied. "We respect your traditions, but we don't need to fight to prove we're worthy of respect." The murmur grew louder. Some species seemed shocked, others amused. Descended from the stage, his footsteps heavy on the arena floor. He walked toward the human section, and the crowd parted before him like water. He stopped at the barrier separating the arena from the seating area, looking up at. This close, his size was even more intimidating. Each of his arms was a weapon in itself, corded with muscle that could probably crush steel. "I will make you an offer," said, his voice carrying across the now silent amphitheater. "If any human can last 5 minutes in the sparring ring with me, I will personally sponsor your species for membership in the Trade Council. Full access to our markets, our technology, our resources. All you need to do is prove you're not cowards." Hayes grabbed Sarm. "Commander, this could be exactly what we need. The Trade Council membership would change everything for Earth." Didn't take his eyes off. "And if we lose?" "When you lose," corrected, "you will leave Terminus Prime and not return for 10 years. Your species will be marked as too weak to stand among us." The silence was absolute now. Could feel Sophie tensing beside him, ready to volunteer. He knew she was capable, probably the best fighter on the ship. But this wasn't about capability. It was about principle. "I appreciate the offer," said carefully, "but my answer is no. We didn't come here to be tested like children. We came as equals and will be treated as equals, or we won't participate at all." His expression darkened. "You mistake mercy for equality, human. In this galaxy, the strong survive and the weak serve. Your refusal proves which category you belong to." Before could respond, an alarm blared through the station. Red lights began flashing along the walls. Coordinator appeared on the stage, her 4 arms moving frantically across a holographic display. "Emergency alert," she announced. "A civilian transport has been seized by pirates in the Crimson Belt. The vessel is carrying 200 passengers, including 40 children. Military forces are 3 hours away." The crowd erupted into worried conversation. Turned back toward the stage, his challenge forgotten for the moment. His mind was already racing, calculating distances and response times. "Sophie," he said quietly, "how far is the Crimson Belt from here?" 15 minutes at full speed," she replied, already knowing where his thoughts were going. Hayes looked alarmed. "Commander, we can't get involved in this. We're not a military vessel. We're barely armed." "Those are children," said simply. He raised his voice, calling out to Coordinator. "The Horizon's Edge is ready to respond immediately. We can reach the Crimson Belt in 15 minutes. The amphitheater fell silent again, looked shocked. "Commander, the pirates are heavily armed. Your vessel is small and lightly defended. This would be an enormous risk." "Calculated risk," corrected. "But those children don't have 3 hours, we do." Turned back to face, his expression unreadable. "You would risk your ship and crew for children, for people you don't even know?" Met his gaze steadily. "Yes." For a long moment said nothing. Then he nodded slowly. "Perhaps I was wrong about humans. Perhaps you do have honor, just not the kind I expected. Go, Commander, save those children. We will discuss your refusal to fight when you return." Didn't wait for further permission. He motioned to his team, and they quickly left the amphitheater. As they ran toward the docking bay, Hayes was practically shouting. The Crimson Belt stretched before them like a field of frozen death. Thousands of asteroids drifted in chaotic orbits, some as small as houses, others as large as moons. The red dust that gave the belt its name swirled between the rocks, making sensors unreliable and navigation dangerous. "Contact on long-range sensors," Sophie reported. Her fingers danced across her console. "The transport ship is holding position near a large asteroid cluster. The pirate vessel is attached to it." Studied the tactical display. The Blood Fang was 3 times the size of the horizon's edge and bristling with weapons. Getting close would be suicide in a straight fight. Scan for life signs, ordered. Reading approximately 200 signatures on the transport, Sophie said. 20 smaller signatures separated from the rest. Those must be the children. And the pirates. 40 combatants on the Blood Fang, another 20 on the transport itself. Rubbed his jaw, thinking. 60 armed pirates against his crew of 30. The numbers were bad, but they had faced worse odds during the colony wars. The difference was that this time they had hostages to protect. Open a channel to the pirate vessel, said. The main screen flickered, showing a male with 3 eyes and ridged skin. He smiled, revealing pointed teeth. Well, well, the pirate said. A human ship, you're far from home, little ones. This doesn't concern you. Turn around while you still can. Release the hostages, said calmly. The military is on its way. You have no way out of this. The pirate captain, who assumed was based on the intelligence brief, laughed. The military is hours away. I'll be gone long before they arrive. But since you're here, maybe you'd like to make a donation. 10 million credits, and I'll let half the hostages go. You killed 2 people already, said. Why would we trust you to keep your word? Smile faded. Because if you don't, I'll kill 10 more, starting with the smallest ones. He leaned closer to the screen. I've heard about you humans, soft hearts always wanting to save everyone. It makes you weak. It makes you predictable. Now run along before I add your ship to my collection. The screen went dark, sat back in his chair, his expression unchanged. The crew waited, knowing he was formulating a plan. Sophie, can we get a boarding pod close to the transport without being detected? Not directly, Sophie replied. But if we use the asteroid field for cover and approach from the dark side, we might get within deployment range. The dust will interfere with their sensors. What about the Blood Fang's weapons? They'll see us eventually. We'd have maybe 3 minutes before they lock on and fire. Nodded. 3 minutes is enough. Prepare a boarding team, 6 people including me. We go in quiet, secure the hostages, and get out before the pirates know what happened. Hayes, who had been silent since they left the station, finally spoke up. Commander, this is madness. Even if you get aboard, you'll be outnumbered. You should wait for the military. Those children don't have that kind of time, said. He stood up and headed for the armory. Sophie, you have the bridge. Keep us alive for 3 minutes. Yes, sir. Assembled his team quickly. Besides himself, he chose 5 of his best people, 2 former Marines, a combat engineer, a medic, and a specialist in close-quarters combat. They geared up in silence, checking weapons and equipment with practiced efficiency. The horizon's edge began its approach, weaving between asteroids like a fish swimming through coral. Sophie piloted with incredible precision, using the natural cover to mask their movements. On the sensors, the Blood Fang remained attached to the transport, its weapons systems idle. 2 minutes to deployment range, Sophie's voice came through's helmet comm. Still undetected. And his team climbed into the boarding pod, a small armored sphere designed to attach to enemy ships and cut through their hulls. It was cramped and uncomfortable, but effective. 30 seconds, Sophie counted down. Good luck, Commander. The pod launched with a violent jolt, watched through the small viewport as the horizon's edge pulled away, already taking evasive maneuvers. The pod sailed silently through space, its thrusters making micro-adjustments to keep it on course. They struck the transport's hull with a metallic clang. Immediately, the cutting torch activated, burning through the reinforced metal. Alarms would be sounding inside the ship now, but there was no turning back. The circle of metal fell inward with a hiss of equalizing pressure. Dropped through first, weapon raised. He landed in a cargo corridor dimly lit and empty. His team followed, fanning out to secure the area. We're in, reported, moving to locate the hostages. The transport's layout appeared on his helmet display, pulled from the ship's database during their sensor sweep. The life signs had been concentrated in the main cargo bay, 3 decks down. Led his team through the corridors, moving fast but cautious. They encountered the first pirate at a junction. He was a large and covered in chitinous armor. He saw them and reached for his weapon, but's team was faster. 2 shots, both non-lethal, and the pirate collapsed. They zip-tied his arms and kept moving. Contact topside, Sophie's voice crackled in ear. The Blood Fang knows you're here. They're powering up weapons. How long do we have? 4 minutes, maybe 5, then they start shooting at both ships. Picked up the pace, they reached the cargo bay entrance to find it sealed with a heavy blast door. The combat engineer moved forward, attaching a breaching charge. The team took cover. The explosion was loud even through their helmets. The door buckled inward and team rushed through the smoke. The cargo bay was massive, filled with containers and equipment. At the far end, could see the hostages huddled together, guarded by 8 pirates. The pirates opened fire immediately. Energy bolts seared through the air, striking containers and sending sparks flying. Team returned fire using the cargo containers for cover. The firefight was brutal and close. Moved left, flanking around a stack of containers. He could see the hostages clearly now. The adults were shielding the children with their bodies, all 4 of their arms wrapped protectively around the small ones. The children were crying, terrified by the gunfire. One of the pirates, a massive with 4 arms, spotted and charged, dropped and rolled, coming up behind a container. The crashed into his previous position, roaring with fury. Fired 3 times, hitting the alien in the leg joints. The went down hard. 3 minutes, Sophie warned. The Blood Fang is charging weapons. The combat engineer tossed into the center of the pirate position. The explosion of light and sound disoriented the remaining guards. His team moved in fast, taking down 4 pirates in the confusion. The others tried to fall back, but there was nowhere to go. Appeared from behind the hostages, holding a small child in front of him like a shield. The child couldn't have been more than 5 years old, her golden eyes wide with terror. "Stop," shouted. "Stop or I kill her right now." Froze, his weapon still raised. The rest of his team halted, holding their positions. The remaining pirates behind their captain, weapons pointed at the hostages. "Put down your weapons," demanded. "All of them, or I start executing children." Looked at the child. She was shaking, tears running down her gray cheeks. He thought about all the children back on Earth, all the people counting on him to make the right choice. Then he thought about what that choice actually was. He lowered his weapon slowly, setting it on the ground. His team looked at him in shock, but they followed his lead, placing their weapons down. "Smart human," said, smiling. "Now step back, all of you. You're going to watch while I—" His hand shot to the knife on his belt and threw it in one smooth motion. The blade spun through the air and struck in the shoulder. It wasn't a killing blow, but it made him flinch, his grip on the child loosening. "Now," shouted. Sophie had been waiting for the signal. Through the cargo bay's viewport, the horizon's edge appeared, weapons blazing. The ship fired at the Blood Fang, forcing the pirate vessel to respond. The distraction was exactly what needed. His team grabbed their weapons and opened fire in perfect coordination. 6 shots, 6 pirates down. The engineer rushed forward and pulled the child away from. The combat specialist hit the pirate captain with a stun round that dropped him like a stone. The remaining pirates threw down their weapons, hands raised in surrender. The entire firefight had lasted less than 2 minutes. "Hostages secure," reported, "preparing for evacuation." "About time," Sophie replied. "The Blood Fang is breaking off from the transport. They're trying to run." "Let them go," said. "We got what we came for." He walked over to the hostages. The adults were slowly standing, still protecting the children. One of them, a female with intricate markings on her arms, stepped forward. "You saved us," she said in accented English. "You risked everything to save us." "It's what anyone would do," replied. "No," she said firmly, "it's what you did." A small child, the one had been holding, pulled away from the adults and ran too. She wrapped her small arms around his leg, hugging him tightly, knelt down, gently patting her head. "You're safe now," he told her. "We're taking you home." The sound of heavy thrusters made everyone look up. Through the viewport, could see a military ship arriving, massive and intimidating. But there was also a smaller vessel, sleek and fast. As it drew closer, recognized the personal insignia on its hull. Had come. The cargo bay's secondary airlock opened, and soldiers poured in, securing the area. Behind them came himself, having to duck to fit through the doorway. He looked at the secured pirates, the safe hostages, and team standing guard. "I came to show you how real warriors handle threats," said, his voice echoing in the cargo bay. "But it appears you handled it quite well on your own." Stood up, still holding the child's hand. "We do what needs to be done." Walked closer, his 4 arms folded across his chest. He looked down at the child clinging to his leg, then at the other children who were now coming out of hiding, their fear fatting. "You refused to fight me in the arena," said quietly. "You said you didn't need to prove your strength through combat. I thought you were a coward." He paused, his golden eyes studying. "I was wrong." "We're not cowards," said. "We just have different priorities." Nodded slowly. "Perhaps that's what the galaxy needs, warriors who know when to fight and when to save." He looked at the child. "What's your name, little one?" "Myra," the child whispered. "Myra, you were very brave," told her. Then he looked back at. "When we return to Terminus Prime, I would like to speak with you privately. I have something to discuss." Nodded. "I'll be there." The evacuation took another hour. The hostages were transferred to the military ship for medical treatment and transport home. The pirates were secured in detention cells. Throughout it all, the child named Myra stayed close to, only leaving when her mother finally arrived to collect her. As the Horizon's Edge prepared to return to the station, stood on the bridge, watching the damaged transport being towed away. Sophie sat at her station, a slight smile on her face. "That was crazy," she said, "even for you." "Calculated risk," replied. "You always say that." "And I'm always right." The private quarters of were nothing like expected. He had imagined weapons on the walls, trophies from countless battles, maybe even skulls or other intimidating decorations. Instead, the room was simple and elegant. Soft lighting illuminated walls covered in what looked like family portraits. Books lined shelves carved into the stone walls. A table sat in the center, already set with food. "Commander, Lieutenant Grant, Ambassador Hayes," said, gesturing to the chairs with one of his forearms. "Please sit, eat, we have much to discuss." Took a seat, Sophie beside him. The chairs were large but not uncomfortable. Hayes sat across from them, looking nervous despite the formal setting. The food on the table was unfamiliar, but it smelled good. "Thank you for inviting us," Hayes said, ever the diplomat. "Your hospitality is appreciated." Settled into his own chair, which creaked under his weight. "I have been thinking about what happened in the Crimson Belt, about your refusal to fight me, and then your willingness to risk everything for our children." "Anyone would have done the same," said. "No," replied firmly. "They wouldn't. I have lived for 93 of your years. I have seen countless species, met thousands of warriors. Most would have waited for proper military support. Some would have demanded payment first. A few would have simply left." He picked up a piece of food with one hand, studying it thoughtfully before eating. "You humans confuse me. You refuse a simple challenge of honor, yet you charge into danger without hesitation when lives are at stake. In my culture, combat is how we measure worth, how we determine who deserves respect." "And in our culture," said carefully, "respect is earned through actions, not demonstrations." Sophie spoke up for the first time. "If I may ask, why is the sparring match so important to you? What does it prove?" Looked at her with interest. "It proves you understand our ways. Every species that comes to Terminus Prime sends their strongest warrior to face me. It is tradition, dating back hundreds of years. When they fight well, even in defeat, they earn our respect. When they refuse, we assume they are weak or cowardly." "But you don't think that anymore?" said. It wasn't a question. "No," admitted. "Your actions proved you have courage, but I still don't understand why you won't spar with me. Not for politics or trade agreements, but simply to test yourselves, to see what you're capable of against someone like me." Hayes leaned forward. "Commander represents our values well, but perhaps we should consider perspective. The trade agreement with the Council would be invaluable to Earth, if a simple sparring match is all it takes." "It's not simple," interrupted. "It's a test based on their values, not ours. If we participate, we're saying we accept their way of measuring worth. We're saying physical combat is how humans should prove themselves." "And you don't believe that?" asked. "I believe combat has its place," said. "I believe in defending the innocent and standing against threats, but I don't believe in fighting just to prove I can." The room fell silent, ate slowly, his golden eyes never leaving his face. Finally, he set down his food and spoke again. "I was born in a warrior family," said. "My father held the championship before me, my grandfather before him. From the time I could walk, I was trained to fight. Every day, every year, learning new techniques, testing myself against the best warriors in the Empire." He looked at his 4 hands, flexing the fingers. "I have never lost a match. 30 years as champion, 187 consecutive victories. Do you know what that does to a person? It makes you arrogant. It makes you believe you're invincible. You're trying to prove something, Sophie said quietly. Not to us, to yourself. Smiled, but there was sadness in it. Perhaps. When you refused to fight, it angered me. But it also made me question why I was so angry. Maybe because you showed me that not everyone measures themselves by combat, that strength can mean something else. Hayes cleared his throat. Surely there must be a middle ground, a way to honor both cultures. There might be, said, but it cannot be forced. If Commander fights me because he's pressured into it, what does that prove? Nothing. It would be empty, meaningless. Appreciated the honesty. Then why this dinner? Why talk to us at all? Because I want to understand, said simply. The rescue operation showed me something. Your team moved like they had fought together for years. Perfect coordination, no wasted motion. The way you distracted the pirates while your ship provided cover. The way you threw that knife at. He leaned forward. That was warrior thinking. Strategic, precise, effective. You are a fighter, Commander. You just choose your battles carefully. That's correct, agreed. Then help me understand your way, said. In my culture, we face each other directly, test our strength against each other. It's honest and clear. But your way seems more complicated. You use tactics, teamwork, deception. How is that honorable? Sophie answered before could. Because sometimes the honorable thing is winning while protecting your people. If it fought directly, the pirate might have killed hostages out of spite. By using tactics, we saved everyone. Including the pirates themselves, added. We could have killed them all, instead we captured them. They'll face justice, but they'll live. Sat back, his massive frame making the chair creak again. This is what I don't understand about humans. You show mercy to enemies who would have killed you. Why? Because killing should be the last option, not the first, said. Every life has value, even our enemies. If we can stop a threat without killing, we should. That philosophy will get you killed in this galaxy, warned. Maybe, acknowledged. But we'd rather die trying to be better than become monsters to survive. The conversation continued for another hour. They discussed human history, the wars Earth had fought, the lessons learned from centuries of conflict. Listened intently, asking questions and challenging assumptions. Hayes mostly stayed quiet, letting and Sophie explain their culture. Eventually stood up. I have a confession to make. This dinner was not my idea alone. Someone else wanted me to invite you here to have this conversation. Who asked? My teacher said. The one who trained me in combat. She has been following the events of the past day with great interest. She wants to meet you. Another warrior? Sophie asked. The greatest warrior I have ever known, replied. She retired from public competition 15 years ago, but she still trains in private. When I told her about your refusal to fight and then the rescue, she became very curious about humans. Hayes looked excited. An introduction to another leader could be valuable for our diplomatic mission. Smiled mysteriously. She's not a leader in the political sense, but her opinion carries enormous weight in our society. If she endorses humanity's admission to the Trade Council, many will listen. And she wants to meet us because of the rescue? Asked. No, said. She wants to meet you because you refused to fight me. She finds that fascinating. Exchanged glances with Sophie. This was getting complicated. When does she want to meet? Tomorrow morning. I've arranged for a private training facility. She wants to observe you, talk to you, maybe even demonstrate some techniques. Paused. I should warn you, she can be very direct. She doesn't care about politics or diplomacy. She cares about understanding people. Sounds interesting, Sophie said. It will be, promised. She's unlike anyone you've ever met. The dinner ended shortly after. Escorted them back to their quarters on the station, a suite designed for human visitors. It was comfortable if oversized like everything else. When they were alone, Hayes practically exploded with excitement. This is perfect. Another influential supporting our cause, if we can make a good impression tomorrow. Ambassador, interrupted, I think you're missing something. Said his teacher finds it fascinating that I refuse to fight. That suggests she might want me to fight her instead. Hayes's excitement dimmed. You think this is another test? I think we need to be careful, said. This whole situation feels like it's building towards something. Sophie was already pulling up information on her data pad. I'm searching for any records of teacher, but there's nothing in the public databases. Whoever she is, she's kept herself very private. That's interesting by itself, said. A warrior skilled enough to train the undefeated champion but who avoids public attention. What does that tell us? That she doesn't care about fame, Sophie suggested. She fights for different reasons. Or she's hiding something, Hayes added nervously. Walked to the window, looking out at the massive station and the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, Earth was waiting to hear if this mission would succeed. The Trade Council membership could mean advanced technology, new resources, better ships. It could change everything for humanity. But at what cost? Get some rest, told his team. Tomorrow we meet this mysterious teacher, and I want us all sharp and ready for whatever happens. Sophie and Hayes went to their rooms, stayed at the window, thinking. He had commanded military operations, fought in desperate battles, made life-or-death decisions. But this felt different. This felt like he was walking into something he didn't fully understand. He thought about little Myra, the child who had hugged his leg in the cargo bay. He thought about the grateful looks from the other hostages. That was why they were here. Not for trade agreements or political power, but to prove that humanity could be trusted, could be counted on when it mattered. If that meant meeting this mysterious warrior tomorrow, then so be it. Had refused to fight because the challenge was empty, designed only to prove physical dominance. But if this teacher wanted to understand humans, wanted a genuine exchange of ideas and techniques, maybe that was different. The training facility was in a quiet section of Terminus Prime, far from the tournament areas and diplomatic quarters. Sophie and Hayes followed through corridors that grew progressively smaller and older. This was clearly one of the station's original sections, built before the modern expansions. She prefers privacy, explained as they walked. Too many students wanted to train with her after her retirement. She had to find places where they couldn't follow. How long was she a champion? Sophie asked. 23 years in official competition, replied. But she fought for decades before that. Her record is 147 victories, 0 defeats. No one has ever come close to matching it. Hayes whistled softly, and she just retired, gave it all up. She said the arena had become a circus, said, too much politics, too much spectacle. She wanted to return to the pure art of combat without cameras and crowds and betting pools. He stopped at a nondescript door. We're here. The door opened into a large circular room with padded floors and walls. Training equipment lined the edges, weights, practice dummies, weapons racks. But the room was empty of people, looked around, confused. I thought we were meeting your teacher, he said. You are. The voice came from behind them, turned to see a female entering through a side door. She was smaller than maybe 9 feet tall, but her presence filled the room. Her gray skin was marked with scars that spoke of countless battles. Her forearms moved with precise grace. But it was her eyes that caught attention, golden like all, but with an intensity that seemed to look straight through him. This is, said with obvious respect, my teacher, my mentor, and the greatest warrior I have ever known. Studied the humans silently for a long moment, then she nodded once. You're smaller than I expected, but size isn't everything. Her English was perfect with barely any accent. I've been watching you since you arrived, Commander. Watching us? Asked. I reviewed the footage of your arrival, your refusal to fight, and the rescue operation in the Crimson Belt. I studied your tactics, your team coordination, your decision-making under pressure. She walked closer, her footsteps silent despite her size. You fight like someone who has seen real combat, not arena matches or training exercises, real war. Earth had some difficult years, said carefully. We learned hard lessons. And you learned them well, said. Your boarding action was nearly perfect. Minimal casualties, maximum efficiency, adaptive strategy. These are not things taught in schools. These are things learned through experience and pain. Sophie spoke up, said you wanted to meet us, why? Smiled slightly. Direct, I like that, I'll be equally direct, I want to spar with you. Hayes started to speak but raised one hand to stop him. Not a test, not a challenge for honor or politics, a genuine exchange between warriors who approach combat differently. I want to learn from you, and I hope you'll learn from me. Considered this? What makes you think we have anything to teach you? You're undefeated, you've trained for decades. Because you refuse to fight, said simply. In 70 years of fighting, I've faced every type of warrior imaginable. Aggressive brutes, defensive strategists, technical masters, wild berserkers. But I've never faced anyone who had the strength to refuse a challenge. That takes a different kind of courage. She walked to the center of the room, her four arms spreading in a gesture of openness. I've spent my entire life perfecting combat arts. I know every technique, every counter, every principle. But all of it is based on our physiology, our culture, our way of thinking. You humans are different. You're physically weaker, but you compensate with creativity and adaptability. I want to understand that. And in return, asked, I'll teach you what I know, said. Techniques that could help humanity defend itself in this galaxy. There are dangerous species out there, Commander. Not everyone will be as willing to negotiate as the. Having warriors who can hold their own could save human lives someday. Hayes looked excited. This could be incredibly valuable, fighting techniques from the galaxy's greatest warrior. I'll do it, Sophie said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at her, frowned. Sophie, we should discuss this. You've already refused one challenge, Sophie said, meeting his eyes. And you were right to do it, but this is different. This isn't about proving dominance, it's about mutual learning. That's something worth doing. Studied Sophie with obvious interest. You're tactical officer on the horizon's edge. You coordinated the rescue operation. You provided cover fire at exactly the right moments. She tilted her head. Assumed commander would be humanity's representative. Why do you volunteer instead? Because job is to make strategic decisions for the entire crew, Sophie replied. My job is to engage threats directly. This is what I do. Interesting, said. She looked at. Do you approve? Wanted to say no. Every protective instinct told him to refuse to keep his people safe. But he also knew Sophie was right. She was the best close combat fighter on the ship, and more importantly, she understood what this really was, an opportunity, not a threat. It's her choice, said finally. But I want assurances. This is a training session, not a death match. Of course, agreed. No lethal techniques, no permanent injury. We stop if either party yields. This is about learning, not winning. She looked at Sophie. When would you like to begin? Now, Sophie suggested. Smile widened. I was hoping you'd say that, but first let me show you some basics. You should understand what you're facing. For the next hour, demonstrated combat techniques. Her forearms moved in patterns that seemed impossible to track, let alone defend against. She could strike high and low simultaneously, grab and punch with different limbs, create combinations that had no human equivalent. Our fighting style is based on overwhelming the opponent's ability to defend, explained. 4 arms mean 4 different attacks at once. Most species can't process that much information fast enough to respond. Sophie watched carefully, her tactical mind analyzing every movement. But you have to coordinate all 4 arms. That must require immense concentration. It does, confirmed. Which means if you can disrupt that concentration, you create openings. The question is how to do that when you only have 2 arms. Footwork, Sophie said. If I can't match your hand speed, I need to control the distance and angles. Looked pleased. Exactly, you're already thinking correctly. Now show me how you fight. Sophie moved to the center of the room and demonstrated some basic human combat techniques. Compared to elaborate forms, they looked simple, almost crude. But there was efficiency in the movements, economy of motion. We focus on using the whole body, Sophie explained. Hips for power, legs for mobility, hands for precision. Everything works together. Limited by having only 2 arms, observed, you've learned to maximize what you have, practical. She gestured for Sophie to continue. Attack me, don't hold back. Sophie hesitated for only a second, then moved. She came in fast, using footwork to circle rather than charge directly. Her first strike was a feint, testing's reaction speed. The counterattack came instantly, 2 of his arms sweeping in from different angles. Sophie ducked under one, redirected the other, but had to retreat quickly as other 2 arms followed up. The exchange lasted maybe 3 seconds before Sophie backed off, breathing hard. Good, said, not even winded. You recognized you couldn't press the attack and cleanly, smart, again. They continued like this for another 20 minutes. Sophie would attack, try different approaches, test various strategies. Every time defended easily, but she also provided feedback, pointing out what worked and what didn't. Watched from the sidelines, analyzing the exchanges. Sophie was good, possibly the best hand-to-hand fighter humanity had produced in recent years, but was on a completely different level. It wasn't just physical superiority, it was decades of experience, perfect technique, and an almost supernatural ability to read opponents. Your lieutenant is talented, said quietly, standing beside. But she's overmatched, could end this exchange at any time. I know, replied, but that's not the point, is it? Looked at him with surprise. You understand. Sophie's not trying to win. She's learning, watching how moves, how she thinks, what patterns she uses. Every second of this sparring session is data. And is doing the same, said. Studying human combat instincts, reaction speeds, tactical thinking. They're exchanging knowledge through combat. Hayes was less impressed. She's getting beaten down. How is this helping us? Ambassador, said patiently, this is exactly what we needed. A chance to prove we're serious about learning, about becoming part of this galactic community, not through dominance but through genuine exchange. On the mat, the sparring had evolved. Sophie was lasting longer in each exchange, adapting to patterns. She started using more aggressive footwork, forcing to adjust her stance. It was still completely one-sided, but Sophie was improving visibly. Finally called a halt. Enough for now. You're learning quickly, Lieutenant Grant, but your body needs rest. Sophie was sweating and breathing hard, but she smiled. That was incredible. I've never faced anyone who moves like that. And I've never faced anyone who adapts so quickly with such limited physical tools, replied. You work with what you have very efficiently. It's impressive. She turned to address the whole group. I have a proposal. Tomorrow is the tournament's closing ceremony. Traditionally, we have exhibition matches featuring famous champions. I would like to give a demonstration with Lieutenant Grant. Hayes looked alarmed. A public match, that seems risky. Not a match, interrupted. A demonstration will show both and human fighting techniques, explain the differences, and display how two warriors from different species can learn from each other. She looked at Sophie. What we've done here today, but in front of the galaxy, it would be educational and help both our peoples understand each other better. Sophie looked at, silently asking for his opinion. Thought about it carefully. A public demonstration would put Sophie at risk, but it would also show the galaxy something important about humanity. Not that humans could match the strongest warriors through brute force, but that they could learn, adapt, and earn respect through skill and determination. I think, said slowly, that's a decision Sophie needs to make. I'll do it, Sophie said without hesitation. But only if we make it clear this is about exchange, not competition. I don't want people thinking this is humanity challenging's title. Agreed, said. We'll present it as a cultural exchange, a demonstration of different combat philosophies working together. She paused. Though I should warn you, I plan to make it dramatic. The crowd will want to see something impressive. How impressive? Sophie asked warily. Smile was mysterious. You'll see tomorrow, but trust me, it will make a statement about both our species. Stepped forward. If is willing to publicly endorse this demonstration, I will add my support as well. Together, we can recommend humanity's admission to the Trade Council. After tomorrow's ceremony, I believe the Council will approve. Hayes could barely contain his excitement. This is exactly what Earth needs. Thank you, both of you. But was watching carefully. There was something in her expression, something she wasn't saying. The demonstration tomorrow would be more than just a sparring session. It would be a message, carefully crafted to tell the galaxy something specific about humanity. He just wasn't sure what that message would be yet. The grand arena of Terminus Prime was packed with spectators from hundreds of species. Stood in the human delegation section, watching as the closing ceremony began. The past 3 days had been intense, filled with tournaments, political meetings, and cultural exchanges. But today was different. Today, the entire galaxy would see what humanity had to offer. Ambassador Hayes sat beside him, nervously adjusting his formal jacket for the 10th time. Are you sure about this, Commander? Sophie looked exhausted after yesterday's training. She'll be fine, said, though he shared the concern. Sophie had spent the entire night practicing, going over everything had taught her. When checked on her this morning, she was focused and determined, but the physical toll was obvious. The arena floor was massive, easily 200 feet across. Holographic displays floated above, showing the action from multiple angles for the crowd. The closing ceremony had featured several exhibition matches already. Famous champions displaying their skills, traditional combat dances, and demonstrations of exotic fighting styles. Now the arena announcer's voice boomed across the space. Honored guests, we have a special presentation. After 15 years of absence, the undefeated champion has agreed to return to this arena for one final demonstration. The crowd erupted in shocked murmurs. Many had thought was dead or had left space entirely. Her appearance today was unprecedented. "Will demonstrate the pinnacle of combat arts," the announcer continued. "She will be joined by Lieutenant Sophie Grant of the human species, representing Earth's fighting traditions. This is not a competition, but an exchange between warriors from different worlds." Sophie entered the arena from one side, wearing a modified version of her uniform designed for mobility. The crowd watched with curiosity as she walked to the center. She looked small in the massive space, but her posture was confident and ready. From the opposite entrance appeared. The crowd's reaction was thunderous. Cheers, shouts, and applause echoed through the arena. Raised all four arms in acknowledgement, then walked calmly to meet Sophie at the center. The two warriors stood facing each other, the size difference stark. Was nearly twice Sophie's height and probably 4 times her weight, but Sophie didn't look intimidated. She bowed respectfully and returned the gesture. "We will begin with basic demonstrations," his voice carried through the arena's speaker system. "Lieutenant Grant will show human combat techniques, and I will demonstrate methods. Observe the differences in philosophy and execution." Sophie moved first, performing a series of strikes and combinations. Her movements were sharp and efficient, using her whole body to generate power. The crowd watched with interest, seeing how humans compensated for their limited physiology with technique and precision. Then demonstrated. Her 4 arms moved in a blur, creating patterns that seemed impossible to follow. Each limb worked independently yet in perfect coordination, striking from multiple angles simultaneously. The crowd cheered, familiar with and proud of their champion's abilities. "Now we will spar," announced. "Watch how different species adapt to each other's strengths and weaknesses." The sparring began slowly, almost choreographed. Sophie used footwork and angles, trying to minimize advantage. Controlled the center, using her superior reach and multiple limbs to dominate space. They exchanged techniques back and forth, each sequence designed to teach the audience something about cross-species combat. But could see it building. The intensity was increasing with each exchange, was pushing harder, forcing Sophie to adapt faster. This wasn't just a demonstration anymore. It was becoming real. Sophie barely dodged a combination that would have ended a normal fight. She countered with a low sweep that jumped over easily. The pace accelerated. The crowd leaned forward, sensing something significant was happening. Appeared beside, his massive frame blocking the view of several smaller species behind them. "Is testing her," he said quietly, pushing to see how far Sophie can be pushed. "Why?" asked, his eyes never leaving the arena floor. "Because she wants to show the galaxy what humans are capable of," replied. "Not by letting Sophie win, but by making her fight with everything she has." On the arena floor, Sophie was struggling. Attacks were relentless now, coming from all angles at incredible speed. Sophie defended desperately, using every technique she knew. She was faster than yesterday, her movements more refined, but it wasn't enough. Swept Sophie's legs out from under her. Sophie hit the ground hard but rolled immediately, avoiding a follow-up strike. She came up fighting, refusing to yield. The crowd was roaring now, impressed by the human's resilience. "She can't win this," Hayes said nervously. "Is too strong, too fast." "Winning isn't the point," replied. Pressed the attack, driving Sophie back toward the arena's edge. 2 of her arms struck high while the other 2 went low, an impossible combination to defend against. Sophie did something unexpected. She didn't try to defend. Instead, she stepped into the attack, accepting a glancing blow to her shoulder to get inside guard. For just a second, Sophie was too close for long arms to be effective. Sophie struck twice, both hits landing solidly on armored torso. They did no real damage, but the crowd gasped. In all her years of fighting, very few opponents had ever gotten inside's defense. Its response was immediate and overwhelming. She grabbed Sophie with all 4 arms, lifted her completely off the ground, and threw her across the arena. Sophie landed hard, rolling to absorb the impact, but the message was clear. Physical strength was still the ultimate factor. Sophie got up slowly, clearly hurting. Tensed, ready to call an end to this. But Sophie raised her hand, signaling she wanted to continue, nodded with approval and reset her stance. 20 minutes, announced to the crowd. "We've been fighting for 20 minutes. In my entire career, only 12 opponents have lasted this long against me at full intensity. Lieutenant Grant is now the 13th. The crowd's reaction was mixed. Some cheered Sophie's endurance, others seemed disappointed she hadn't been beaten faster. But the political observers understood what this meant. Humanity had just proven they could stand against the galaxy's elite, if not as equals, then at least as worthy opponents. The sparring continued for another 5 minutes. Sophie was visibly tiring, her movements slower, her defenses weaker. Could have ended it at any time, but instead she maintained the pressure, testing Sophie's limits without breaking her. Finally, Sophie made a mistake. She overextended on a strike and capitalized instantly. 2 arms grabbed Sophie's extended arm while the other 2 swept her legs. Sophie went down hard and followed, pinning her completely to the mat. It was over. The crowd erupted in applause, held the pin for 3 seconds, then released Sophie and helped her up. Both warriors were breathing hard, though showed far less fatigue. "Well fought," said, loud enough for her words to be broadcast. "You have honored your species and yourself." Sophie managed a tired smile. "Thank you for the lesson." But wasn't finished. She turned to address the entire arena, her voice carrying to every corner. "Today you witnessed something important, not a victory, but an understanding. Lieutenant Grant could not match my physical strength. No human could, but she adapted, learned, and persevered." Gestured to Sophie with one arm. "Humans are not the strongest species. They are not the fastest or the most durable, but they have something equally valuable: the ability to analyze, adapt, and overcome through creativity and determination. These are warrior qualities just as important as raw power." She turned to the section where the Trade Council sat. "I formally recommend Earth for membership in our council. They have proven themselves worthy, not through dominance, but through courage and character." Stepped onto the arena floor, his own massive form drawing attention. "I add my support to this recommendation. The humans risked everything to save our children from pirates. They refused combat when it was meaningless but accepted it when there was purpose. This is the kind of ally the Empire needs." The council members conferred among themselves, their discussion projected on holographic displays for transparency. After several minutes, the council leader stood. "The council accepts these recommendations," the leader announced. "Earth is granted provisional membership in the Trade Council, effective immediately. Full membership will be confirmed after a probationary period of 1 standard year." The human delegation erupted in celebration. Hayes was shaking hands with everyone nearby, his face split by a huge smile. Other delegations approached, suddenly interested in making contact with Earth's representatives. Everything had hoped to achieve on this mission had just happened. But's attention was still on the arena floor, was speaking quietly to Sophie, words that the broadcast system didn't pick up. Sophie nodded, looking surprised by whatever was saying. Then did something that shocked everyone. She walked to the edge of the arena where the horizon's edge was visible through the observation windows. The ship was docked nearby, showing the repair work being done on the damaged section from the pirate encounter. "There is one more demonstration I wish to make," announced, "with permission from Commander." Felt every eye in the arena turn toward him. He had no idea what was planning, but he nodded slowly, trusting her despite his confusion. Left the arena, and the crowd murmured in confusion. The holographic displays followed her as she moved through the station's corridors, heading toward the docking bay. Sophie joined in the stands, still catching her breath. "What's she doing?" Sophie asked. "I don't know," admitted. They didn't have to wait long. The holographic displays showed entering the docking bay where the horizon's edge was docked. She approached the ship, studying the reinforced hull that protected Earth's technology and crew. "In my 70 years of fighting," said, her voice broadcast throughout the arena, "I have perfected techniques that push physiology to its absolute limit. I can break stone with my hands, bend metal with pure strength, shatter armor that would turn away weapons." She placed all 4 hands against the horizon's edge's hull, fingers spread wide. The crowd watched in silence, unsure what was happening. "This is what pure physical power looks like," said. She pulled. The sound of tearing metal echoed through the docking bay. The hull plate, reinforced with alloys designed to withstand micrometeorite impacts and weapons fire, began to bend. Its muscles strained, her 4 arms working in perfect coordination. Slowly, impossibly, the hull plate tore away from the ship's frame. The crowd gasped collectively. The holographic displays showed the damage clearly, a section of hull nearly 10 feet across, ripped free by bare hands. She held the twisted metal above her head, displaying it like a trophy. His jaw dropped. Hayes looked like he might faint. Even Sophie, who had just spent 30 minutes fighting, seemed shocked by this display of raw power. "That's impossible," Hayes whispered. "That hull is rated for combat situations. Nothing should be able to tear it apart like that." But wasn't done. She set the torn hull plate down carefully and turned to face the nearest camera, knowing her words would reach every being in the arena. "I show you this not to intimidate, but to illustrate a point," said. "Yes, I can tear apart a starship with my bare hands. I am physically stronger than any human will ever be. But Lieutenant Grant and her crew saved our children using something I cannot tear apart: courage, tactics, and teamwork." She walked back toward the arena, leaving the damaged hull behind. "I could destroy this ship, but I could not have planned the rescue operation. I could defeat any human warrior in single combat, but I could not have coordinated that boarding action. Physical strength is powerful, but it is not everything." Re-entered the arena to thunderous applause. She walked directly to where stood in the stands and looked up at him. "Your ship will be repaired at expense," she said. "Consider the damage a teaching tool. That torn hull section should be preserved as a reminder that strength takes many forms." Descended to the arena floor, Sophie beside him. He stood before this legendary warrior who had just casually torn apart a starship. "You could have just told people that," said. "You didn't need to damage our ship." Smiled. "Words are forgotten. Actions become legends. Tomorrow, the story spreading across the galaxy won't be about a demonstration match. It will be about the day the undefeated champion tore apart a human starship to prove a point about different kinds of strength." Sophie laughed, wincing slightly from her bruises. "That's going to make one hell of a report." "Indeed," agreed. She looked at both humans seriously. "I spent my entire life pursuing physical perfection. I thought strength was the ultimate measure of worth. But watching your species these past days has taught me something. Evolution pushes different species in different directions for good reasons, became strong because our demanded it. Humans became clever and cooperative because Earth demanded that. Both paths have value." She extended one of her 4 hands toward. He shook it, her grip gentle despite its obvious power. "I have a final gift for you," said. She produced a small data crystal. "This contains training materials I've developed over decades, techniques that could help humans defend themselves against physically superior opponents. Use it wisely." Accepted the crystal carefully. "This is incredibly generous. Why?" "Because I'm old," said simply. "My fighting days are ending, but humanity's days among the stars are just beginning. You'll face dangers and enemies I can't even imagine. If my knowledge can help keep even one human alive in the years to come, then my legacy extends beyond arena victories." She turned to Sophie. "And you, Lieutenant Grant, you have potential I rarely see. You learn quickly, adapt well, and refuse to quit even when overmatched. Those are the marks of a true warrior. I would be honored if you would consider training with me during your probationary year with the Trade Council." Sophie looked at who nodded. "I'd like that," Sophie said. "I learned more in 2 days with you than in years of standard training." The ceremony concluded shortly after. The crowd dispersed, species delegations returning to their ships and stations. The human team returned to their quarters, exhausted but triumphant. Hayes immediately started composing his report to Earth. "This is perfect. Trade access, training opportunities, formal recognition from the Empire. This mission exceeded every expectation." Stood at the window again, looking at the horizon's edge. Repair crews were already working on the torn section, welding new plates into place. Tomorrow they would begin the journey home, carrying news that would change Earth's future. Sophie joined him at the window, her body obviously sore from the day's fighting. "That was insane," she said. "All of it. I can't believe she actually tore the hull apart." "It made her point," said. "The galaxy needed to see that we're not trying to match them in physical strength. We're offering something different, something complementary." "Do you think it worked?" Look pointed to his data pad where messages were already arriving. Requests for meetings, trade inquiries, cultural exchange proposals, all from species who had previously ignored Earth. "I think it worked perfectly." Appeared at their door, having to duck to enter the human-sized quarters. "I wanted to say goodbye properly," he said. You're leaving tomorrow morning. We are, confirmed. Thank you for everything. The invitation, the dinner, the introduction to, all of it mattered. I should thank you, said. You taught me something important. I've spent 30 years as champion thinking physical dominance was the ultimate achievement. But you refused to fight me, and that bothered me more than any defeat could have. It made me question everything. He looked at the torn hull visible through the window. Could have taught me these lessons years ago, but I wasn't ready to learn them. It took meeting humans, seeing your different approach to strength, to finally understand. Sophie smiled. So you'll think twice before challenging the next species that comes to Terminus Prime. Maybe, admitted. Or maybe I'll challenge them for the right reasons, to learn, to exchange knowledge, to understand them better, not just to prove I'm stronger. They talked for another hour, discussing plans for future cooperation, training exchanges, and cultural programs. When finally left and Sophie were alone in their quarters. Commander, Sophie said quietly, do you think we did the right thing, coming here risking the ship accepting's challenge? Thought about little Myra, the child who had hugged his leg after the rescue. He thought about the hostages who had thanked them with tears in their golden eyes. He thought about tearing apart their hull to make a point about different kinds of strength. Yes, he said simply, we came here to prove humanity belongs among the stars, not by being the strongest or the fastest or the most advanced, but by being ourselves, creative, adaptable, compassionate, and stubborn enough to fight for what matters. Sophie nodded, satisfied with that answer. Get some rest, Commander. Tomorrow we go home as heroes. Tomorrow we go home as representatives, corrected. The heroism was just doing what needed to be done. But alone in his quarters that night, did feel a sense of accomplishment. They had come to Terminus Prime with nothing but hopes and determination. They were leaving with a trade agreement, valuable training materials, powerful allies, and most importantly, proof that humanity could stand among the galaxy's greatest civilizations. Not through matching their strength, but by offering something equally valuable, a different perspective on what strength truly means. The torn hull plate would eventually be removed and preserved, just as suggested. It would be mounted in Earth's diplomatic corps headquarters, a permanent reminder of the day the galaxy's strongest warrior refused to spar with a human commander, until she met someone who showed her that refusing to fight could be its own form of strength. And in the years that followed, when other species looked at that twisted metal and heard the story behind it, they would understand something fundamental about humanity. That humans measured strength not in how hard they could hit, but in what they were willing to protect, who they were willing to save, and how much they could learn from those different from themselves. That was the message had wanted to send. That was the legacy of their time at Terminus Prime, and that was the foundation upon which Earth would build its place among the stars. We'll be ready, said. Nodded. Good. Get some rest, Lieutenant Grant. Tomorrow will be challenging, she looked at. And Commander, thank you for trusting me with your officer. I won't disappoint you. As they left the training facility, couldn't shake the feeling that tomorrow would change everything. The question was whether that change would be what humanity needed or something else entirely. Maybe that was something worth doing. Finally left the window and went to his own room. Tomorrow would bring answers, one way or another. He just hoped those answers wouldn't come with consequences he couldn't accept. The station's artificial night cycle had begun, dimming the lights throughout the corridors. Lay in bed, but sleep didn't come easily. His mind kept running through possibilities, preparing for scenarios he couldn't quite predict. Whatever happened tomorrow, he knew one thing for certain. The galaxy was watching. Humanity's reputation, its future among the stars, might depend on the choices he made in the next few days. No pressure, he thought wryly, and finally drifted off to sleep. Sophie laughed. This time maybe, but wants to talk. What do you think that's about? Shrugged. Guess we'll find out. The ship turned back toward Terminus Prime, leaving the Crimson Belt behind. Didn't know it yet, but his refusal to fight and his willingness to risk everything for strangers had changed something fundamental. Word of what happened would spread across the station, and soon, across the galaxy. Humanity had proven something important, not through combat in an arena, but through action when it mattered most. This is insane. We could lose the ship. We could lose everything. Or we could save 40 children, said, not slowing down. I know which choice I can live with. They reached the horizon's edge in minutes. The crew was already at battle stations, having heard the emergency broadcast, took his position on the bridge, and Sophie settled into the tactical station. "All hands prepare for immediate departure," ordered. "Set course for the Crimson Belt maximum speed. This is a rescue operation." The ship detached from the station and shot forward into space. Behind them, Terminus Prime grew smaller. Ahead of them, 40 children were waiting, and time was running out.